I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, so brace yourself. I feel like The Office is pretty overrated, which isn't to say that I don't like it, but considering that it's one of the most popular sitcoms ever, even being the most streamed TV show of the year on any platform as recently as 2020, 7 years after the show ended, yeah, I think it's a little overrated. And I've spent lots of time on this channel talking about all the things I love about all my favorite sitcoms, because I have a lot more fun trying to tell you why you should like something and not the other way around. But this one has always been in the back of my mind, just slowly picking away at me. So for a show like this, at this scale, I think I have to make an exception. Just this once, and maybe a few more times if this video does well. I'm kidding. So what is my problem with The Office? First, we need a little perspective. The Office is a sitcom about a mid-range paper company, Dunder Mifflin, specifically its humble branch in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The show is a mockumentary, which means it's filmed to look like a real documentary of real-life events, when really it's scripted just like any other TV show. This sense of reality is central to the identity of The Office. Not only is the style meant to mimic reality more than your average show, but the setting and the characters are as well. There is nothing flashy or extraordinary about Dunder Mifflin Scranton. The office space is bland, the people in it are unremarkable, and even their product is about as plain as it gets. Paper. I mean, in the pilot, Jim can barely even muscle through his own job description.
I'm boring myself just talking about this.
The shaky camera work makes everything feel unplanned and raw, and the camera itself has a physical presence in the show. Even if you're not a fan of The Office, you're probably familiar with the way that Jim will glance at the camera every time something funny happens.
Please don't jim the camera like that.
Jim the camera?
Dunder Mifflin is not only a real place with real people, but we, the audience, feel like we're actually there with them. And so in an environment like this, when the regional manager, Michael Scott, makes an awkward or inappropriate comment,
Oh no, sorry, it's an inside joke. There's this bartender in Stanford who, you know what? You just have to be there.
I wish I was. I love inside jokes. I'd love to be a part of one someday.
you get secondhand embarrassment through the screen. This is the grounded concept that makes The Office tick. The humor is subtle, but it's real. It's relatable, because who hasn't been in an awkward conversation or worked with someone who took their job way too seriously? In the early seasons of the show, it did this incredibly well, unlike anything else at the time. And thanks to some clever writing and legendary casting, the show had an amazing first few seasons, even winning an Emmy for Best Outstanding Comedy Series for its second season. But little did they know that the biggest threat facing Dunder Mifflin was in fact not downsizing, but a little thing called flanderization. This is a made-up word that you've probably heard before if you're a sitcom person like me. It describes the process by which a once nuanced character slowly over time becomes simplified down to just a few of their personality traits. And those remaining traits are usually much more exaggerated than they ever were before. So in the end, you're left with a character that's more one-dimensional than you had in the beginning. The term originates from the character Ned Flanders of The Simpsons. Ned's original purpose was to be a well-meaning, well-rounded, almost annoyingly perfect neighbor to Homer Simpson. One of his personality traits was that he was a devout Christian. But over the course of the show, he was simplified down to the point where this one thing was his sole character trait, and most of what he did or said revolved around it. And so the term was coined based on his name. Flanderization is everywhere, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. For example, there are plenty of beloved characters out there who were clearly flanderized. Ron Swanson gets more comically masculine with each passing episode of Parks and Rec. Pierce Hawthorne from Community goes from being an out-of-touch old man to an actual supervillain. And Joey Tribbiani from Friends, while not the smartest in season 1, is practically a human golden retriever by season 10. People love these characters, so flanderization must not be inherently bad. In fact, I've always felt that the driving force behind this was simply the writer's room taking a look at what audiences did and didn't respond to for a character, and then writing future episodes accordingly, which doesn't sound so bad when you put it like that. However, flanderization is also not inherently good, which brings us back to The Office. It's no secret that characters from The Office were flanderized. I'm not gonna act like I'm blowing your mind when I smartly point out that Kevin is acting just a little bit less smart by the end of 9 seasons.
Angela's cats are cute. So cute that you just want to eat them. But you can't eat cats. You can't eat cats, Kevin.
But the case of The Office is much more egregious than all the ones I mentioned before, to the point where this flanderization is even offensive to what the show used to be. It was so important that these characters feel like real people, because that was the idea of the show. That's what makes the comedy work, like we talked about. If you were to strip away the element of reality from The Office, what does the show become? Unfortunately, you're about to find out. The Office doesn't only stop feeling like it's set in reality, it starts feeling like a whole cartoon, which is why I'm gonna call what happened to the show cartoonification, where flanderization to me is simply about characters becoming more simplified but not necessarily more ridiculous. Cartoonification is more specifically about being turned into something ridiculous. But these are pretty much 2 made-up words, so let's not nitpick too much here. You get what I'm trying to say. These characters aren't just being simplified down and exaggerated, they're being turned inside out. So in this video, I am finally going to speak my piece as we go over the conceptual death of The Office. Let's get started. I think the best way to break this down is character by character. I'm not going to go in depth on every single character from the show, but we'll definitely go over all the most important ones. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, he's going to talk about Kevin, but no. At least not right now, okay? What do you say we start with one that's just slightly less obvious? Toby Flenderson. Toby is the branch's human resources representative, which means he's in charge of the employer-employee relationship, keeping the people happy with the company that they work for. This naturally places Toby in opposition with Michael Scott, who runs the office and never goes a single day without saying or doing something that could get Dunder Mifflin in legal trouble. So when Michael wants to have a meeting about the Kama Sutra,
This is the best meeting we have ever had.
Thank you, Kevin.
I find this incredibly offensive.
Well, I find it beautiful.
Actually, she's right. This isn't appropriate. Why don't I take these?
No, you're not going to collect them.
it's Toby's unfortunate job to shut it down. This is why Michael hates Toby. Michael has no concept of what's appropriate and what isn't, so he feels like Toby is just out to get him. In the mind of Michael Scott, Toby exists as this mythical force of evil.
If I had a gun with 2 bullets and I was in a room with Hitler, Bin Laden, and Toby, I would shoot Toby twice.
Now, Michael might make Toby out to be the villain of The Office, but the truth is that he's just a normal guy trying to make a living.
Well, I was in the seminary for a year and dropped out because I wanted to have sex with this girl, Kathy. Followed her back to Scranton. Took the first job I could find in HR. Later, she divorced me. So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
This is the source of a fantastic running joke that we see throughout the early seasons, where Michael hates Toby with a burning passion, even though he's the one that's being unreasonable, and Toby is just your everyday voice of reason trying to do his job.
Right, Toby? We're going to...
Actually, I didn't think it was appropriate to invite children since it's, there's gambling and alcohol and it's in our dangerous warehouse and it's a school night and, Hooters is catering. Is that enough? Should I keep going?
He's not the extremely unpleasant person that Michael makes him out to be, at least not in the beginning. Because throughout the course of the show, Toby actually does become the mythically boring and insufferable person that Michael thought he was. It's almost as if we're seeing Michael's distorted, childish idea of what Toby was become a reality, which kills the original joke that was in place, where Michael had no real reason to villainize Toby as much as he did. I know no one likes the guy that explains the joke, but it's really important for this video since I'm trying to show how this cartoonification killed the comedy, so you'll just have to bear with me. Toby was a normal guy who Michael hated for no good reason, and it's funny to see how much Michael can hate Toby, but by the end, Toby actually becomes this boring, fun sucker that Michael thought he was. And of course, everyone else around the office eventually starts to hate him too, but now they have real reasons to.
This sounds a lot like the premise of my latest Chad Flenderman novel.
It's interesting that you're drawn to the point of view of the attacker. You would like the turn of the table.
Okay, the latest Chad Flenderman novel tells from the point of view of his nemesis, Dr. Lucifer Wu.
So there still is a joke, but it's not layered like it used to be. Now the joke is that Toby is the office punching bag because he's a buzzkill. He won't shut up about his novels or the Scranton Strangler. He becomes weirdly obsessed with Nellie after she expresses even the slightest bit of interest in him.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
Do it, you know.
Look at me.
I don't look at you. It's funny, right?
And is just generally kind of a creep. So we can consider that joke killed and Toby Flenderson cartoonified.
Smile if you love men's prostates.
Moving on, I want to talk about Stanley, the man who lives to leave the office at 5 p.m. Stanley is a simple guy who's only there for a paycheck. He doesn't want to make friends, he doesn't want to be in Michael's pointless conference room meetings, and like most characters were in the beginning, he's pretty uninteresting. His life outside of the office doesn't seem to be filled with exciting adventures. And even if it could be, that just doesn't seem like the type of thing he'd be interested in.
If I'm not in my bath with a glass of red wine in 1 hour, you're both dead.
When I'm at home at night in my own house, in my sweats, drinking some red wine, watching my mystery stories, the last thing in the whole godforsaken world I want to hear is the voice of Michael Scott.
Michael, however, in the same way that he does with Toby, has a way of sensationalizing things, to put it nicely. Whether it's assuming that Stanley was going to be good at basketball.
Stanley, of course.
I'm sorry?
What do you play, center?
Why, of course. What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know. I don't remember saying that. What? You gotta be kidding me!
Or asking him if he learned something, quote, on the street.
Stanley, that's freaking brilliant. How do you know that? Did you learn that on the streets?
And now for the fun part where I explain the joke. Michael is an idiot who's making assumptions about Stanley that are simply not true. And Michael is just too clueless to realize how embarrassing this actually is. Stanley might play into his delusions from time to time.
I did learn it on the streets. On the ghetto, in fact.
No kidding.
But really, he's just a normal guy.
It's all about my bonus.
Somewhere along the way, however, that starts to change. I'd say the first big milestone is when Michael finds out that Stanley is cheating on his wife, which on its own is not the craziest direction to take the character in. But when this happens, they reveal that Stanley is actually quite energetic.
Those interns, they told me they saw you at the club, and they all said it was you. It was clearly just racial profiling gossip, the little...
Damn! Told her it was a stupid idea to go up in the club.
So stupid.
Stanley going clubbing with his secret mistress sounds more like something that season 1 Michael would assume Stanley does, and less like something that he would actually do. We see a lot more of this new side of Stanley during the Florida episodes, where he's in full-on party mode.
How was the drive?
Fantastic. Stanley drives so fast.
Life is short. Drive fast, leave a sexy corpse. That's one of my mottos.
I would love to hear the other mottos. Wow. Are you that bored?
Yeah, it's just rum. I'm not bored. I'm a pirate.
Is that another motto?
It's whatever you want.
I understand why some people do find this funny. It is kind of a clever subversion that this guy we've known for years as the office grump turns out to be a wild party animal when he's not at work. And in a different sitcom, I think that joke might actually work. But here, in supposed reality, it just makes Stanley seem like a bit of a, you guessed it, cartoon character, which chips away even more at the foundation that the show was built on. Personally, I preferred it when the most animated we ever saw Stanley get was when he got his one free pretzel of the year.
Attention Scranton Business Park. There will be complimentary pretzels available in the lobby from now until 4 o'clock as a thank you to our loyal tenants.
Because that felt real and was in line with everything we knew about him at the time. But instead, he suffers the same fate as Toby.
My friend and I are new here in Tallahassee. Would you like to get a cocktail? Maybe go out for a little dancing. Beautiful day now.
So I've been putting this next one off because if you're an Office fan, then you probably already know everything I'm gonna say about him. I think this might be one of the most harsh cases of flanderization I can think of from any sitcom, and that is Kevin Malone. Kevin is an accountant at Dunder Mifflin Scranton. He's slow, overweight, and charmless.
You tell me who this sounds like. Slow moving, inattentive, dull, constantly snacking, shows a lack of motivation.
Hey.
Despite all this, in the beginning, he is still a functioning human being. He has hobbies like poker, which supposedly he's pretty good at. He has a band that he plays with in his free time. There's even an episode where he finds out that he might have skin cancer, and we see him in a very human and vulnerable state, which of course is there to set up the comedy of Michael being an ass about it. But nonetheless, Kevin is a real human being. Or I guess I should probably say, was a real human being. By the end, Kevin's mainly just there to be unreasonably dumb and act like a child.
It's just that I wish the puppets would talk more about the alphabet. Not for me, but if any kids are watching, A, B, and so forth, you know, M-N-L-O, P. Now do the Swedish Chef.
I'm not familiar. What province is he from?
He lives on Sesame Street, dumbass.
You know, come.
Kevin, stay.
Kevin, come.
Kevin, stay.
Kevin, come.
Stay.
Come on, right now.
Cookie, Kevin, cookie.
There is no cookie, Kevin.
Is there a cookie?
Mm-hmm.
One of my least favorite moments from the entirety of the show is the chili cold open, where Kevin says he's bringing in his famous chili that he worked on all night. But then, clumsy old Kevin accidentally spills the chili all over the floor while carrying it into the office. Since I think I'm getting pretty good at this, let's try to dissect what the joke is here. He spilled the chili and made a huge mess. Oh, and then he gets all messy too when he tries to clean it all up in the worst way possible. Classic Kevin, am I right? I actually think this scene is the perfect litmus test for seeing what kind of humor someone liked from The Office. Instead of asking someone, well, what kind of Office fan are you? You can just ask, what do you think of the chili joke? If they love it, like I know a lot of people do, which is fine, that means they're probably a bigger fan of the later seasons, where the show was just a funhouse mirror reflection of its former self. Mindy Kaling, who wrote for the show and also played Kelly, said in a book of hers that she was so opposed to doing this scene that she told the producers that if they ran it, she would quit the show. I absolutely love this because A, she's got a point, and B, that sounds just like something Kelly would do. But let's not dwell on the chili thing any longer than we have to. It's very physical comedy, and I just don't watch The Office for that type of laugh. Kevin is by far the most cartoonified character from the show, and it's always shocking rewatching the first seasons and hearing Kevin with a normal speaking voice and not one of a 6-year-old.
I bet it's gonna be me. Probably gonna be me.
Yeah, it'll be you.
In the show's defense, there is an interesting phenomenon I've noticed among sitcoms, where it seems like there's always at least one character who gets progressively dumber as the show goes on. Let's go ahead and call it the Malone principle. I'm guessing it just makes writing easier when you have a bumbling buffoon around, so maybe the longer a show goes on, the harder it is to resist the pull of the Malone principle. But nonetheless, Kevin is my least favorite character from the show, as I feel like he really represents all of the worst parts of it. And I don't blame you if you love him, but you have to admit, that man is a cartoon.
Oh. You know who that is?
Oh.
Don't be a caricature, Kevin.
So we're feeling good. Let's get another big one out of the way. Michael Scott. We've already mentioned him plenty in this video because he's the heart of The Office, both the show and the workplace inside the show. Michael's lack of self-awareness, his insensitivity, his need to be liked, it drives a lot of the comedy of the show. And like we've mentioned with characters like Toby and Stanley, his distorted perception of them and The Office is always funny to watch.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way. I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
Now, luckily for Michael, he leaves the show before things get really cartoony. But it's still safe to say that he goes through some outlandish changes over his 6 seasons at Dunder Mifflin. As far back as the first episode, you can see that Michael was never the smartest person.
All right, done deal. Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. My mistake. That was a woman I was talking to. So,
She had a very low voice.
Unlike Kevin, Michael is established as being a bit of a fool, but he has a particular way of being a fool. It's not so much that he's just generally stupid, but that he has abysmal social skills.
My proudest moment here was not when I increased profits by 17% or when I cut expenses without losing a single employee. No. It was a young Guatemalan guy. Mr. Scott, would you be the godfather of my child? Wow. Didn't work out in the end. We had to let him go. He sucked.
He doesn't know how to read a room. He wants the office to be this sensational, dramatic place, and he wants everything to be about him. While Michael is definitely a big personality, he's still grounded enough to fit in at a place like Dunder Mifflin. And personally, I enjoyed the nuance that early Michael had. Was he a well-meaning boss who just got it wrong most of the time? Or was he a scumbag who just wanted to look like a good person for the camera crew following him around? Depending on the episode, he kind of bounced back and forth. Over time, however, this was squashed in order to make Michael more easily likable, or at least that's my interpretation of it. Michael slowly becomes more childlike, so that when he does something stupid or hurtful, it appears to come from a place of just ignorance rather than malice. And to be fair here, season 1 Michael was pretty harsh.
Try my googie. Try my googie. Try my googie. Try my... Yes! That was great! Now she knows what it's like to be a minority!
But still, maybe we could have found a better middle ground. Michael doesn't descend into infancy quite as much as Kevin, but near the end you do start to wonder how he's even able to function as an adult.
Why don't you explain this to me like I am an 8-year-old?
We have to spend that by the end of the day or it will be deducted from next year's budget.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
You didn't happen to bring any coffee, did you, Michael?
Milk and sugar.
Oh, awesome. You're a lifesaver. Wait, is this just milk and sugar?
That's what I said.
Do you drink this every day?
Every morning.
So instead of a Michael that tries so hard to prove that he isn't sexist that he actually ends up doing the opposite, we have a Michael who's basically a toddler in a suit, which I guess can be funny. I mean, The Boss Baby made like $500 million at the box office, but that's a completely different type of comedy. And also, I'm all for suspension of disbelief, but it does get increasingly harder to believe that this version of Michael would keep his job as regional manager, and that his branch would be performing well at all. Early Michael, even with his many shortcomings, is still believable as a guy who maybe got lucky and landed a job he wasn't qualified for. It's not ideal, but this kind of thing does happen out there. And you might say, well, it's a sitcom. It's not supposed to be realistic. And you would be right in most cases, but the gimmick of The Office is that it's supposedly real, and that was never a limitation of the show, it was a strength of it. So for example, Michael misinterpreting a social cue will always be funnier to me than Michael falling into a koi pond. Angela is a funny case because, similar to the original flanderization of Ned Flanders, we see Angela's Christianity start as just one element of her character and eventually grow into one of her most defining qualities, and taking it to absurd extremes. She becomes increasingly judgmental and has greater moral grandstanding as the show goes on. Now, it's not like Angela was ever front and center in the show, so unlike a character with more screen time like Michael, there was never really a ton of room for her to be a complex character. But she was still believable as an average person working their job as an accountant, even after she got more religious. But I think the part of her that really starts to feel like a cartoon is the cat thing. In the beginning, she just has a cat.
I don't want to be like a guy here, you know? Like Stanley is the crossword puzzle guy, and Angela has cats. I don't want to have a thing here.
And likes talking about it from time to time.
I can't. Sprinkles is sick. She's been sick for some time. Thank you for asking. No one asks about Sprinkles.
Pretty normal stuff. We all know people who love talking about their pets, but as time goes on, this starts to be a bigger part of her character, and she gets more cats, and even goes as far as cleaning them with her own tongue.
Is she cleaning the cat with her tongue?
Oh.
Imagine what an insane revelation this would have been if it happened in season 1. This is not something a normal person does. At this point, she's basically like that crazy cat lady from The Simpsons, who is literally a cartoon.
Oscar, will you take him?
No, I'm a dog person.
If you pray enough, you can change yourself into a cat person.
Those guys always turn back, Angela.
So before moving on to our last character, I wanted to go over a couple of honorable mentions. Dwight Schrute is a character who was always meant to be a little cartoony, so I kinda give him a pass. He's meant to be the perfect contrast to Jim's normalcy, so he is a bit of a cartoon. He takes his job way too seriously, he's loyal to a fault, he's a prolific beet farmer and aspiring black belt. He's goofy, but in a realistic way. That said, Dwight's antics go from abusing his power to pick the company health plan to what can only be described as attempted murder.
It's 15 feet down, it's at a 45-degree angle. Get set in your haunches, it's like you're catching a medicine.
The size of my haunches.
And it's during these Dwight moments where I think the show really loses its connection to reality. Another great example would be the 2 episodes where there is supposedly a fire at Dunder Mifflin, one from season 2 and the other from season 5. The earlier episode shows everyone sluggishly getting up and evacuating the building, with Dwight staying behind and taking safety protocols way too seriously.
You okay? I got you. Cover your nose and mouth. Breathe through your nose. Breathe through your nose. Remove your stockings. Okay? Don't melt right into your flesh. Stay below the smoke line.
The other episode has Dwight concocting a complex fire drill scenario, complete with real fire and smoke, jamming doors, and heating up handles to convince the office that the fire has already spread. What follows is sheer chaos. And like the Chilly Cold Open, which you already know how I feel about, it's very physical comedy. Look at the difference between these 2 depictions of Dwight. One where he army crawls out of the building thinking he's some action hero saving the office from a small toaster fire, and the other where he's actually an evil mastermind trapping the office in a dangerous simulation of a fire, even setting off firecrackers to ensure psychological torment like he's Jigsaw. Not only does this feel pretty crazy for a place like Dunder Mifflin, but it also relies on some cheap laughs. Like Kevin breaking open the vending machine amidst all the chaos to steal all the snacks, which, side note, is definitely something that the cartoon version of Kevin would do and not the real one. But we're already past Kevin. While I appreciate that the idea of Dwight does stay relatively consistent, the way it's manifested does become increasingly more cartoony. This fire drill might be something that Dwight would talk about doing in season 1. It just doesn't seem like something that he would actually go through with doing. So let's move on to Dwight's other half. Jim Halpert is an important character because he's the office normal guy. Along with Pam, he's sort of the audience surrogate, meaning that we feel represented in the narrative by Jim since he's so reasonable. So it's important for characters like this to stay normal in a sense. And luckily, Jim pretty much does. But there is one thing that I wanted to hone in on. Since Jim constantly finds himself bored with his job and annoyed by his deskmate Dwight, he likes to play pranks on him. Little things like putting his stapler in Jell-O or convincing him that it's Friday when really it's Thursday. I never really felt that Jim had an affinity for pranking, but that it was just something that he did to pass the time. But by the end of the show, he's on another level.
Oh God, now I can't drink at this thing. I get really pranky when I drink.
I could list all sorts of crazy pranks that Jim's pulled off by the end, but let's just take this one where he plants a mysterious wire in Dwight's computer, knowing that he'll want to track down where it's coming from. We eventually see the wire leading Dwight outside and up a telephone pole, which is obviously a little ridiculous. In the early seasons of the show, I can't imagine that that wire would have even left the building. But here, the comedy of seeing Dwight climb up a telephone pole is just so much easier. There's an episode where Jim and Dwight join forces to prank Todd Packer together, and there's this scene that I think perfectly explains how these pranks evolved over time.
What do we think? What would drive him crazy? I know. Here we go. Pepto-Bismol in his hot chocolate. You have got to stop with the hot chocolate stuff. I was thinking maybe we could jam his drawers so that they only come out 2 inches, and then that way you can see everything in them, but you can't get at it.
Does Edgar Allan Poe know about that one? So sinister. That wouldn't annoy a person at all. Where do you come up with this stuff?
Okay.
Jamming a drawer is so subtle that Dwight can't even understand how it would be considered a prank and wants to do something more bombastic and obvious. But later he does realize how frustrating it is to be able to see what you want from inside your drawer, but not being able to open it wide enough to pull it out.
I just had a couple of notes. Let me grab a pen and... Damn it. Just when we were getting going.
Ironically, this scene is from one of the later seasons, so it's nice to see Jim harken back to a time when his pranks were so simple yet so effective.
This morning, I knocked myself in the head with the phone.
That actually took a while. I had to put more and more nickels into his handset until I got used to the weight, and then I just took them all out.
But I do think that, in general, the later seasons are on Dwight's side with this one. Jim's pranks get a little less clever and a little more absurd. As for Jim and Dwight, you might be wondering why I put them here in the honorable mentions section. And again, it's because I feel like the idea of them never really changes. It's not like the other characters that we've talked about, who I feel like are different people after it's all said and done. But their antics do get so exaggerated after years and years of upping the ante that they definitely contribute to the show's overall exit from reality. David Wallace is Dunder Mifflin's CFO, so in the early seasons, he brings a lot of gravitas to the narrative. Because when he shows up, you know things are about to get serious. But he eventually becomes just as insane as everyone else. And I'm not talking about how he loses his grip on life after getting kicked from Dunder Mifflin. I know I'm cheating a little bit here, but Robert California, who functionally is pretty much the new David Wallace for all of season 8, is arguably the craziest character that's ever been on the show. And comparing these two, I think says a lot about the direction the show went in. The early seasons show the higher-ups at Dunder Mifflin as being strictly business. But in the later seasons, the CEO might be the most certifiably insane person there.
I will not be blackmailed by some ineffectual, privileged, effete, soft penis debutante. You want to start a street fight with me, bring it on, but you're going to be surprised by how ugly it gets. You don't even know my real name. I'm the Lizard King.
Although, to be fair, Wallace does return for the last season, and he's back to his old normal self. So, credit where it's due. And now to quickfire some honorable mentions. These ones are so obvious that there really isn't anything interesting to talk about. Meredith starts with maybe a drinking problem, and ends with definitely a drinking problem, and so much more. Creed starts as a confused old man.
He obviously forgot to get me something, and then he went into his closet and dug out this little number, and then threw it in a bag.
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
And ends up fugitive on the run.
It's Halloween. That is really, really good timing.
And Andy is... well, okay, I don't really have a bone to pick with Andy, other than the fact that they turned him into a poor man's Michael Scott for the last few seasons. Our very last case to go over in this video is Oscar Martinez. Oscar is supposed to be one of the few well-adjusted people in the office. He himself explains it best here.
Pam and Jim are on their honeymoon, so there's not the usual balance between sane and others. It's a very dangerous time. The coalition for reason is extremely weak.
So his being a normal person is important for the balance of the office. But as the show goes on, the coalition for reason starts getting weaker and weaker. And like we've seen with some of the other characters, what starts as a joke ends up being made real. For example, after Oscar comes out as gay, Michael starts making all sorts of assumptions about him based on stereotypes.
Oh, hello, Oscar Mayer Wiener lover. I bet that you have a bunch of very liberal girl-type friends who trust you implicitly because they know you'd never touch them because of your condition.
The joke, if you'll indulge me one last time, is that Michael is, yet again, being an idiot, making embarrassing assumptions about Oscar based on generic stereotypes. And the show makes it clear that Oscar is just a normal guy. But like with the other characters, that's not enough for Michael. So he makes a big deal out of it, and we all laugh at him for it. By the end of the show, this exact joke has been completely turned on its head. Like this scene where Oscar and Pam are trying to find out if the state senator is gay.
My friend at the Scranton Blade is totally plugged into these matters.
You're in the gay mafia.
You're thinking of another group, much wealthier, much older. You sound ignorant.
I want you to genuinely ask yourself, does this not sound like something Michael might say to Oscar in one of the earlier seasons? Assuming that he could make a call to his secret contact to find out if someone is gay, or the mention of a gay mafia, or even anything similar. As always, I'm not trying to say that this is a bad joke, but you can see how Oscar is less grounded here. Or like this episode where the poor man's Michael Scott is hiring people for the warehouse, and he asks Oscar,
"Who's the most jacked guy in all of Scranton? Like your wildest fantasy guy?"
Bulk or definition?
Definition.
Bruce Kenward. He hangs out at Planet Fitness.
Are those just show muscles, or is he really strong?
Oh, he's plenty strong.
Again, if this happened in the earlier seasons, the joke would have been that Michael foolishly assumed that Oscar knew who all of the most muscly guys in Scranton were because he's gay. But here, now that reality doesn't matter, the joke is that Oscar does know, and he even knows what gym he goes to. And so, another one bites the dust.
Why can't you just do regular sit-ups?
I'll tell you why. Because the floor is disgusting.
When you're looking at all this stuff back to back, I think it's impossible to deny how much these characters and the show itself changed. I know that there was a number of writers who left and entered the show, which happens to most shows, but here it feels so obvious. Like at one point, a new creative team took over, but they grossly misinterpreted what made the early seasons funny, as if they thought it was funny when Michael made fun of Toby, but didn't truly understand why. So their version of the show was based off a surface level understanding of the first 4 seasons, let's say, which is how we ended up with something that has shades of what the show was, but is ultimately just a shallow reflection of it. To be fair, writing something as good as the early seasons of The Office would be very difficult, and it's certainly not like I could do it. And I want to be clear about something else too. I am not trying to say that the show fell off simply because it became less realistic. I love unrealistic things. Some of my favorite sitcoms ever, like Community or How I Met Your Mother, are incredibly unrealistic. But that's part of the identity of those shows. And the identity of The Office was realism. That's what made it funny. That's what made it special. And once that went away, you're left with a show that isn't special. It's just another sitcom with some wacky characters and a few decent laughs here and there. So to wrap this video up, I want to talk about change. Obviously, things are going to change over the course of hundreds of episodes of a TV show. You can't make the same jokes over and over. You'll want to introduce new characters and new ideas. A certain amount of change is inevitable, in my opinion, but not all change is equal, which is why I've been keeping an ace up my sleeve this whole video. That's right, Pam Beasley, the humble receptionist. I don't think that Pam becomes a cartoon over the course of The Office, but she does change. In the beginning, Pam is very subdued. She willingly stays in a bad relationship with Roy. She wants to be an artist, but is too afraid to fail. And honestly, she lets a lot of her coworkers push her around. But as the series goes on, she becomes more confident in herself. She breaks up with Roy, she goes to art school, she becomes a salesman, and she eventually agrees to move out of Scranton altogether for a brighter and more ambitious future. She even has a chance to take a new job where she'll basically start all over again as a receptionist for a new Michael Scott, and she doesn't take it because she's a changed person. This is how a human being that's the subject of a grounded documentary might grow and evolve over time. This isn't exclusive to Pam, of course, but I do think she's the best example of it from the show. She doesn't become a caricature of herself, and her growth is realistic and satisfying to watch in the long term. Honestly, I think the most cartoonish thing she ever does is get permanently banned from Chili's, and I'm certainly not gonna complain about that. And now you know my problem with The Office. Even though I do love the show and still enjoy watching it from time to time, I always feel so betrayed by the end. The Office was so amazing in the beginning, and apart from the original UK version that came before it, there really wasn't any other sitcom quite like it at the time. And this formula resonated so strongly with audiences that it inspired a whole generation of mockumentary sitcoms, like Parks and Rec, Modern Family, and Abbott Elementary. But by the end of the The Office, it feels like just another sitcom that takes place in goofy sitcom land, where even though Kevin can't do math, he holds a job as an accountant. There are exceptions to some of the things we talked about in this video, of course. I'm sure you can probably find jokes from the later seasons that do have that classic subtle wittiness to them, and you can also find jokes from the early seasons that are more in your face. But I think the general change of direction still remains clear. The last episode of The Office ends with a very powerful thought from Pam, which in a very ironic way encapsulates what made the show so special.
I think an ordinary paper company like Dunder Mifflin was a great subject for a documentary. There's a lot of beauty in ordinary things. Isn't that kind of the point?
Thank you for watching, and stay gold.